So we've gotten our hands washed, we put our set of gloves on, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to turn on our NxStage unit. There's a rocker switch right here in the back on the left hand side of the unit. You just flip it up to turn the unit on. You'll get a bunch of 8s displaying on the screen first, a click, and then the software version, which for this one is 4.13, will pop up, and at that point you open the door and slide it forward. If you don't do that fast enough for the machine's liking, it will throw an alarm at you, and the alarm will have a code on it. So I would say just refer to your book for it, but basically it just involves turning the machine off and either shutting the door and then turning it back on, or leaving the door open and turning it back on. So just check with the book, but it's an easy procedure to fix if you accidentally leave it shut too long after the 4.13 or the software version for your model is on the screen. It's an easy fix, so don't worry about it. So we've got our unit turned on. It's ready to take the cartridge, which will feed down into here. But before we get to that, the next thing that we're going to do is hang our saline bag and get that out of the way. And that goes right here on this hook. So be back with you in a second. Okay, so for our saline bag, it's sodium chloride, just referred to loosely as a saline bag. It'll come in a package similar to this usually, and there's a tear mark at the top. So you just grab it there and rip it down the length, and then pull the bag out. So this can go in the trash. You want to squeeze the bag, make sure there's no leaks in it, and then there should be an expiration date on it, which this one says July 20th, so I'm good there. July of 2020, so I'm good there. And then you can hang it on your hook. Alright, once it's on the hook, there's one other thing to worry about, and that's the little butterfly tab on the inlet that you're going to use. Just go ahead and twist that, and it'll pop right off, and you can chuck that in the trash also. So that's it to hang in the saline bag, and you'll need that in place first before you put the cartridge up, because it plugs into the saline bag. So now onto the cartridge. We're going to get it ready to go, and I'm going to take you over there with me so you can kind of see what goes into just even taking that thing out of the package. Okay, so as you can see, we've got our cartridge here. It's in the packaging that we took it out of the box in. Just a basic plastic bag. One side of it will be perforated, so we grab that perforated side and tear. And it should just come off in a strip if everything went properly. You can chuck that in the garbage. You won't need that anymore. So we're going to pull it out of the bag. And we do want to save the bag. First off, we're going to lay the cartridge in the bag for this next part. So basically on the cartridge you'll see these pieces of white tape, and there's 7 of them on this type of cartridge, which this is, as you can see, this is a NxStage cartridge. I'm not sure if there's different varieties that would plug into these. I'm assuming everything is NxStage that goes with the machine itself. But there's 7 of those little white tear tabs, and then there's a little piece of plastic right here. And that little piece can come off also. But before I do any of that, I check my connections. So these little connectors sometimes are loose, and then as you start jostling things around, they'll pop loose and you'll get air in the lines, which can be, it's not a pain in the butt here as much as it's a pain in the butt once you're got everything hooked up to the system and you don't want air in the lines. You're trying to get it out. This type also has a little adapter that's clipped onto one of the lines. I always remove that because I'm going to use it. So I keep this adapter, and I'm just going to place it on top of my warmer over here on my NxStage machine. So all my connections are good. I'm going to start tearing these tabs off. And all that's holding that on is a couple of clear pieces of tape, so just pull and the clear pieces of tape will let loose. So no worries there. So I've got my cartridge free from all those tabs and whatnot. It is now ready for me to move it over to my NxStage machine. And so I'm going to reset the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing over there, and we'll meet you back in a second. Okay, so I'm bringing my cartridge in, and I'm just going to set it for now on top of the warmer. The next thing I'm doing is taking the saline spike end of the tubing, holding the package down just so it doesn't slide off onto the floor, and then draping this off to the side and kind of shaking it in order to get some of the kinks out. Sometimes just shaking it will not work, and it will be a little bit of a frustration to get these untangled. Looks like today it did fine. I'm going to just hang that on my saline bag. I'm not going to spike the saline bag yet. I'm just going to hang it there to get it out of the way. So I just moved to the other side so you guys can see a little bit better. I'm going to put the cartridge down into this slot. Alright, so this, the dialyzer, the little cylinder, that will be on the left side of the unit when I put this in. Alright, the first thing I'll do, and I'll get you guys, you'll probably see a close-up up in the corner here of what's going on, but you'll put the clear plastic tubing through these things called air sensors, and they're just looking for air in the lines, and you've got 3 of those inside this area of the machine. So there's one here in the top left corner, there's one about middle ways on the far right side, and then one down in the bottom right corner. So once you have all of those all pressed in, you are ready to seal the cartridge up in the unit. So you just keep the handle pulled up and push it forward, and these little door handles will lock on when you pull that down. Just like so. Alright, so my cartridge is now inserted into the unit, and I can move on to my next step, which is seeing about getting this saline bag spiked. And I have something on the side here called an arterial pressure pod that we need to get plugged up. Alright, so my cartridge is in, and now the next thing that I'm going to do is, according to my list, spike my saline bag. I'm ready to do that. Actually, I did forget something. There is check the fluid detector. So the fluid detector is on the left side of my machine, and ours just looks like this. So this thing detects if there's any liquid spilling, like the saline, or if there's any blood spilling or anything like that. When liquid makes a connection between those 2 silver bars, it sounds an alarm, and it sounds like this, to let us know that there's a spill somewhere and we need to figure out where that is. So this just goes on the side of the unit. Once I make sure that it will properly still beep at me. So we did that. Alright, so now the next thing that we do is spike our saline bag. So I take that, I'm going to remove the plastic cover, but I'm going to keep it. I want to put that back on at the end of treatment so that I don't stab myself with this needle. Once you put it in your trash, you know, sometimes it'll stick through the bag and get you, and you weren't expecting it. So this I put in where I took the twisty off of the bottom of the saline bag. That's where this goes. And most of these are pretty similar. They go about halfway, and then it gets kind of tough, and you have to bear down on it pretty well. But you want to seat that thing as flush as you can to that where the twisty was. So, and then my lines are hooked up to my saline bag. The next thing that I do, there's a line that's got this little pod looking thing on it. It's called an arterial pressure pod. And so I want to plug this loose line into the side of the machine. There's a little silver spot, and we'll get a close-up of that also probably in the corner here to show you, but that goes right in the side of the machine there. Alright, so once that is done, the last thing that I have to do is hit my add water button, which just looks like a faucet dripping into a cup on the machine. Now what the machine's going to do is going to pump saline out of the bag and air out of the lines back into this bag. So they kind of trade places. It puts the saline in the lines, flushing the air out as it goes. And that air just goes back through the line up into the bag, so they're just trading spots. And so while that's happening, you've got 23 minutes, and every other batch there is something you can do inside that 23 minutes that will kind of kill two birds with one stone, and I'm going to show you what that is right now. Okay, so like I said earlier, this is something that I usually do when the 23 minutes is counting. Once I've got the machine up here doing that, I get this machine to do this, and that is checking my chloramines on a new batch. That's something that you'll do every time that you've got a new batch, so this is just one of the procedures that you'll kind of get used to putting in there. I just use a glass to check the chloramines in. I make sure the glass is clean, doesn't have any leftover detergent or anything like that of the sort in it, and I use that to do this little chloramine test. So I usually clip the line. I've never had it squirt me like when I forgot to do that, but I just do that for safety's sake. Alright, so once I've got the orange line out, I put it into the cup. I do not touch the sides of the cup with the end. I unclip, and then I hit my green button. So it's not going to do anything. It just kind of sits there for, I guess, about 30 seconds. And so you may think you did something wrong, but you didn't. It's just slow to catch up to what you're doing. But it's going to dispense water into the cup. And then once it's done dispensing a certain amount, you're going to use your test strips, and I'll show you what they look like and how the test is done and whatnot. You're going to use those to test for chloramines in the water supply to the machine. That way, if there's any kind of contaminant in your water supply that shouldn't be there, this should tell you, and so you should be able to catch it before you start giving that water to the patient and causing problems. Notice that it's still not dispensing, even after I said all of that stuff. Here it comes. That's it. That's how long it takes. So I wanted to give you a real-time estimate of how long to wait for that, because it can really make you think you've done something wrong and it's not working. It just takes a while. So now I'll speed this up and get to the test. Okay, so it's beeping at me. It's telling me it's done dispensing water. I go ahead and clip this, just so it's not going to spray anything on me, and set my water glass down. And then I reconnect this line. Now I've reconnected the line, but I do not hit that green button yet. I'm not ready. I need to test this first. Alright? So my test strip looks like this. I'm just going to, or the actual thing I compare the test strip to, it looks like this. And I'm just going to keep that handy. And this is what the test strips look like. Ours are from a company called RPC. You just tear it, try to tear it straight down the middle as you can, and then just peel it open and take out the test strip. So you don't need this, you can throw it away. Alright, and for the test, you take the end that has a little window, a little color to it. You hold the end that doesn't have anything on it, and the end that has a little color to it, you stick that down in the water. Don't let it touch the sides of the glass, and just swish it around. Don't let it touch the sides of the glass though, and count to about 60. Do this for about a minute. So we'll be back after a minute. Okay, so we swished it around for a minute. We've got our color that it's going, as far as it's going to change color, that's where it's going to be. We flip it a little bit to get the excess off, and then just hold it in some good light and compare it to our color chart. And this one looks fine. It's we want it to be between these bottom two. If it's above this one anywhere on the chart, then they're too high and something's wrong with how the water supply is acting, and we need to get that addressed. So after you're done with that, you can throw the test strip away and keep your color chart, of course. Oh hey, I almost forgot to tell you, to get to this, you're going to want to push the green button a couple of times. Basically, you'll push it until you see where it says batch expires, and then it gives you a time. So that's how long until this particular batch of dialysate, it will then expire. So we've got 87 hours to wait before it would be bad. So that's it. That's how you test for chloramines and get your batch ready to use when it's your first time through that batch. Okay, so the other thing I try to do is to set up the station right here for the patient so that it's ready to go when they come in as well. The noise you hear in the background is the sound of the PureFlow machine when it is sitting there waiting for you to use it. So you'll have to excuse that. Not really anything I can do about that. So paper tape, we use basic medical tape, and we first lay out some of that. We're going to put a base strip down. You clean your table, but just to be sure and safe, we put a base strip of tape down. And then we lay out 11 pieces of tape that are all about 7-8 inches long. On top of that. And you'll notice that I'm making a little tab at one end so that it's not sticky right there, and I can peel that piece of tape up real easy. And same thing for the patient, when they're peeling it off their arm, it's a little easier for them. So, I pull my 7 to 8 inches of tape off, and then I just pinch the end to make a little fold, and then tear that loose and put one piece on top of the other as I go along. And as I use them, the tab will peel up, so it's easy for me to get a hold of the next one because the tab will peel up also, and I can just run my finger across it and get the piece of tape that I need. So I'm going to lay out 11 of these. I'm not going to put you guys through that. I'll be back with you as soon as I've got the 11 pieces laid out. Okay, so I've got my 11 pieces of tape laid out. These are what I'll use to bandage the patient as I go along, both for the beginning of treatment and the tape that I'll need at the end of treatment to take the patient off and bandage her up then as well. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I need 2 other pieces of tape that are kind of unique. You make them the same way, but you have to tear them afterwards. So this is for what they call the butterfly strip, which basically just kind of anchors the needle into the arm, and you'll see more about that later when the patient is actually putting the needles in their arm. So I just get a piece of tape that's a little shorter this time. Let's say about 4 or 5 inches long, about the width of your hand. And then on the end that I made the tab on, I just grab a hold of it and I try to tear about a 1/4 inch width, like so, and then just stick that here to the end of the table for safekeeping until I need it. So, and then I need 2 of those, so I do the same thing and stick that one right next to it. So those are now ready to go whenever I need them. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves a little on-station garbage bag so we don't have to walk all the way to the garbage can every time we need it. So this is the bag the cartridge came in, so that's why I said don't throw this away. You can, you have a good use for this. Just keep that, and then take a couple pieces of tape, once again about 4 or 5 inches long. Put about half of it inside the bag, and then the other half you'll tape to the table itself there. So, and then I also tape it off to the chair, so I'll tear one more piece of tape about the same length. And do the same thing, just hold it up, put about half of it inside the bag so that it can hold a decent amount of weight, and then put the other half attached to the chair there. So now I've got a little garbage bag on the side of my station that I can use if I need to. That tape roll is about done, so we're good there. We'll get us a fresh one. And on to the next part. So I'm going to cover this area so that we don't have to do, you still clean your table and clean your area, but you just don't have as much to worry about with this next step. Alright, so the next step is we use these little pads. They unfold to be pretty good sized. They're actually way bigger than this table. So I usually fold back about 1/3 of it, and then that's what I will use to cover the patient area here with. And once again, I'm just going to use tape to secure that down, make sure it doesn't move around. It's always fun starting a new roll of this stuff because it wants to tear into strips instead of all at once. So be careful with that. Once you've got your strip started there, I tear off. I still pinch the end because I want this to be up. So while you're doing this, if you hear that sound, that means your 23 minutes is up. Just go ahead and mute it. It'll do it again and display 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D. Just mute it again. And now it says 23.0 on the screen. And I can leave it there for right now while I finish doing this. Usually, while I'm not worried with recording and things of that sort, you can get your station set up, your chloramines checked. You can get all of that done while the 23 minutes is going on. That's our normal time frame. That's how long it takes me to get this stuff set up. So I put some tape there. I put some tape right here so that the crease gets made, because I don't want that to be a slope where everything kind of rolls downhill. So I just tape that crease. And then I put a piece at the back of the chair where her elbow is going to rub, so that her elbow doesn't yank that back and forth. So there's a piece at the front, a piece at the back. It can't go back and forth. There's a piece right here that keeps it from being pulled this way. And it doesn't really come up this way very much, but these pieces kind of hold it from doing that also. So that just gives you a nice little clean workstation that you can peel off and throw right in the trash once you're done setting up. Alright. So next thing, I got a few other things to use the tape for before I get done with it. So the next thing is our syringes. So the way that normally works is you take 2 syringes, and these particular ones, they come with the needle on the end. So we're going to get rid of that. On these, we don't need that. So, but I do want to leave this in the package once I've removed that needle, and just leave the top of the syringe sticking out just a little bit. So same thing with this one. Take that off, throw the needle part away, and keep the syringe, leave a little sticking out of the top. So now I'm going to take a piece of tape, so now I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to lay it upside down once I make one of those tabs on the end. So I lay it with the sticky side facing up, and I use the tab at the end to keep it from sticking my glove. Now I'm going to take my syringe and put it face down. So the very top of this yellow tab, I'm going to stick to the tape. And same thing for the other one. I'm just going to stick the top of that yellow tab to my tape right next to the other one. Now, we're going to take these guys and we're going to stick them right here on our machine. Just like so, so they're hanging there when we get ready to use those in a little bit. And so we're almost done with our tape. The last piece of tape that we need that we are going to need is about 4 or 5 inches long. We stick it right here on the side of the machine. So right here. Yeah, right there's where that one needs to be, because it'll hold one of our lines in place for us later, and it's just a handy spot to have it. And we're done with the tape. So there's a few other things that you'll need on your table. I usually grab 2 of these guys. These are the alcohol swabs, so that you've got a total of 4. Those will be used for the patient to clean off the site on their arm where the needle will go in. You need 2 sponges. These are 2" by 2" sponges. That's the start treatment. You'll need 4 of those same sponges at the end of treatment. We'll show you that later. So I usually go ahead and set those out. I give the patient their temperature, their thermometer. And I lay the tourniquet next to that up in that top corner. So these things are things that the patient needs to get their needles set up and to get information to put into the iPad for treatment. The other thing that we need before we're completely ready to go and ready for the patient to come in and do whatever, to do their dialysis, is syringes. So we've already got 2 of those guys. We need a few more. So 4 more of them are going to be just like those first 2 that we did. We're going to take the needle off of them. And we're going to put those just right here at the edge of the table. So, we need 1 more that's going to be over here sitting underneath those 2 that we hung, and that one is to be hooked up to the actual dialyzer, the filter. So it's same thing, we need to take the needle off and just take that one and lay it over here on the machine. Okay, so we've got 1 more needle that we need in this patient's case. They take heparin as a blood thinning agent, and so on this one we just open the pack and I set it over on top of the warmer until I'm ready to take the heparin into the syringe. So you will need the syringe in order to pull the heparin out of the container. So once that's done, then we throw the needle away and use that regular end to hook into the patient's tubing and to deliver the heparin. But for now, we just set it out of the way. Okay, so as I said earlier, we've got our 23 on the screen. It is ready to go through a process they call snap and tap, and that is where you clear the remaining air out of the lines. So we're going to start with our arterial, which is our red one. We're going to make sure the connection is tight and give it a few thumps where that hard plastic is. Sometimes air bubbles like to hang out in there. And then about a foot of the line at a time, I'm going to pop the line a pretty decent snap to get any air bubbles that are just kind of sitting in this line to break free, and go ahead and travel up into my saline bag. So all the way through to my arterial pod, and I tap the arterial pod on the side of the machine, and I'm checking for any small air bubbles. You'll see a pulse in it, and that's what you want to see. But if you see any small little like soda pop air bubbles in it, then keep tapping it until you don't see any of those. Then we're going to move to the other side of the machine. So in here, we're going to unclip our dialyzer for the first time. So there's two plastic straps, one here and one down low. And we just pull those loose and throw them in the trash. And then we're going to take our dialyzer and flip it to where these lines untwist. If you notice that they are still in an X, when you flip this, then you twisted it the wrong way and just twist it back the other way. And that'll give you the slack that you need to pop this guy into this holder that's up on the left side. But first, before we do that, we want to give it a few taps to flush any air that's sitting in the top of this out this tube and over to my saline bag. So, did that. Going to clip that back in, and now I'm going back to the other side. Then I'm at the top of the machine. This is my venous line now. So I'm going to snap on these. All the way up to my blue connector, and then I'm going to check it and make sure it's tight. Then back to my red line, so I go through that whole process twice. Here, I'll speed the second one up. And then take both your lines and visually check them. For any air bubbles that might still be in there. Everything looks good. So at that point, I've done the snap and tap process. I'm ready to start hooking these lines up. So I hit stop to get the pump to stop pumping. The next thing that I'll do is I take the saline T, makes a little T, it's got a white clamp on it, salt is white, so saline. Alright, I'm going to take this, which is connected to the red arterial line, kind of tangled here with the blue one at the moment, but hopefully you can see. The red line just has a T off of it with this little white clamp. So I want to take the cap off and bleed a little saline out. Now I'm going to clamp that white clamp, and I can let this go. The next line that I'm going to take is my green and white. Green is for my dialysate. White is, once again, still for my saline. So I want to clamp both of these, open this line. Don't touch your ends. Take your green line and that piece of tape that we put up earlier. That's what holds that up and keeps it from touching anything while you're messing with your saline line. So we take our saline line and we make sure it's decently untangled from everything else before we plug it up. And we're going to put it on that saline T. So we take that cap off, set it to the side, and then plug those two into each other. So you should have two white clamps next to each other, both clamped. The next thing is on a section of that, the thinner of the tubes, not the thicker, the thinner of those tubes, we're going to triple clamp it to make sure nothing gets through there unless we want it to. So this goes on there also. And that makes 3 clamps on my saline line. So I don't want any fluid getting back to the patient. We're trying to drain fluid off of the patient. Okay. So that's done. Now I need to go back here, take my green, my dialysate line, and hook that into the chicken foot. So the set of 3 here. If it's a brand new batch, you'll see a connector at the end of each one of those. So I clip this, and that prevents any fluid from squirting out here. And I pick one to remove. I'm going to save that cap, I'm going to use it in a minute. So then I put my green line to my green line, my dialysate to my dialysate. And I unclamp and unclamp. Now that that's done, I come back over here. Right beneath the saline bag, there's a big blue clamp. I clamp it. I clamp both of these yellow clamps, and I clamp this other blue clamp below the connection. So the reason I did that is because the big blue clamp at the top is for both of these lines. So clamping here should keep this from squirting on me. You'll find that that's not always the case. So just to be safe, go ahead and clamp here also, and that'll kind of keep things honest. So then I'm going to disconnect this yellow line. This is the waste line. So this line is the one that carries the patient's waste away from them. Urine that would normally be gotten rid of, under normal circumstances that they can't get rid of. That's what this machine is partially doing for them. It is letting them get rid of excess waste. So yellow for urine. That's an easy way to remember that this is your waste line. And we're going to take this syringe off of our waste line, and you'll see the use for the syringe at the end. But we connect the yellow line to the yellow line, just like we did with everything else, and unclamp those 2 yellow clamps. And now, because you handled the patient's waistline, you're going to change gloves. So we'll see you back here in a second after we change gloves. Okay, so fresh set of gloves on. We're going to move on to the next part, which is taking our arterial line. We're going to clamp the small red clamp and the big red clamp. We're going to disconnect this from each other, the red from the red. Kind of jumble it if it's tangled up with the other stuff. Try to get this line free because you're going to stretch it to the patient later, and so you want to make sure that there's enough slack there. So take your red line and take the adapter that came out of your cartridge package. I usually flip open the end first and put my red line on the adapter and hang it right here on my saline bag. Keep it out of my way. Next, I'm going to reach over and grab one of those blank syringes. One of these guys. So I take the syringe out, I chuck the wrapper, and I attach it to the red line here on the bottom of the saline bag. Once I've done that, I hold the syringe upwards and draw 9, unclamp the red line and draw 9 into the syringe, clamp the red line again, disconnect the syringe, and trade it out with one of these guys that I have hanging over here on the front of my machine. Then I take the blank one and do the same thing. Unclamp, hold it upwards, and pull out 9 cc's of saline. Clamp it again, and this time I'm going to leave the second one hanging there. So now we go on to the blue line, which we clamped earlier, so everything's good to go there. We go ahead and disconnect. Once again, straighten the line out a little bit, see if it can use some detangling, which this one could use some. Then once your line is detangled, you're ready to hook it up to the other end. Same adapter, just unscrew the other end and put your blue on the end of the adapter. Same loop, just hang it right there on your saline bag. So once again, do the same thing with the syringes. Get a blank, one of these guys, throw your wrapper away, and then not the one with the yellow clip on it, the other one, the blank one that's on that blue line. Attach your syringe there, hold it upwards, unclamp the blue, draw 9. Clamp the blue again. take your syringe, switch it out with the other one that you have hanging on the front. Take your blank, attach it to the end, unclamp, draw 9, clamp, and leave that line hanging. At this point, you are completely set up and ready to have the patient start inserting their needles and inserting whatever their prescription is. If you're going to pull a pound or 1 kilogram, whatever your measurement system is, off of the patient, then you would set that into the machine, and basically you're just waiting on them at this point. So you can do this, and after you've gotten to this point, it could be earlier in the day, say, and you want to do dialysis at like 8 o'clock at night, but you don't have time right before 8 o'clock to get this set up. So you could set the machine up, say, around lunchtime, and let the machine run like this and keep everything hooked up and ready to go for whenever the patient says, hey, I'm ready to knock this out, let's get it done. Then you can just pick up from here in getting your patient hooked up. So this will save you some time and kind of help you with your time management a little bit, just knowing that you can get the machine to here without the patient being involved.